The Endurance Asia podcast.
And always tell the truthful story if they ever ask. Stop the complaining because things ain't that bad.
Hello, Mr. Warren Bates. Welcome to the Endurance Asia podcast. How are you doing, sir?
I'm pretty good. I'm feeling quite relieved and euphoric and happy that we've just concluded the event and knowing that I might get a full night's sleep tonight, which is a real bonus.
We're literally, I think you've just seen the final Pure and Pursuit teams get over the finish line of GODZone 2023. And I always think about, I've done a bit of adventure racing myself, but I always think for the race directors, it's actually like as tough, if not tougher on you guys than the actual competitors. But how are you feeling right now? You like, has it been proper sleep deprivation? Has it been really stressful? What's been the overwhelming sort of feeling over the last week?
Well, we've done, this is the 11th. So I guess as they go, this was one of the least stressful because we were blessed with some great weather. The course was fantastic and the teams went really well. And I think most people come to GODZone now with their eyes pretty wide open. They know it's hard. And I think the preparation that teams are doing is exceptional and teams are turning up better than they've ever been. And yeah, I mean, I guess tired, but happy. And the last 4 days on the course are always difficult because we start to get the leaders come through and then it's sort of a bit of just a never ending stream and it never seems to finish. But yeah, I just think, just pleased for the host region, the teams themselves, the support crews, the volunteers, everybody's played their part in delivering probably our best chapter yet. And yeah, I guess I've got a chance now to catch up. I always say the 2 weeks of GODZone is probably the worst 2 weeks of the year for me, and then the 2 weeks after are probably the best. So that'll be no different this year.
Yeah, you're in a state of almost euphoric, and it's the same for a lot of the competitors as well. I mean, look, last year, so we voted GODZone 2022, the Traverse, as the race of the year at Endurance Asia. I think that I kind of think of it as the epitome of like the toughest, not just adventure race in the world, expedition adventure race, but one of the toughest races in the world. I mean, arguably, there's so many different endurance competitions out there. But it's interesting you say like the level of competition and the standard at which people approach this race. Everyone knows that they can't just rock up to the start line and chance it. There's a lot of prep that has to go in from the competitor's perspective as well as the race directing, which goes without saying.
Yeah, and I mean, you just can't. And, we thankfully after COVID now, we have international teams coming back and it was fantastic to see them. And it's really interesting talking to them, some of them who've multi-year experience and, American teams there, and I'm just sitting on the finish line with them. I said, we've done World Series races. We went to Eco Challenge when it came back and they said, it's not even close. They said, 3 days at GODZone is the same as 6 days at Eco Challenge. It's just, I think it's the intensity, the technical difficulty, the quality of the opposition, because Kiwis are very good in the backcountry, and just how unrelenting it is. It just weighs on you physically and mentally, and it's really tough. And you've got to get 4 people through the course together, and it's 3 of you might be great, but if one of you is not great, then it's tough. And last year we didn't even have 15% of the teams finish. This year we'll probably be near 50%, which is a massive improvement, but still so really hard. And yeah, I mean, we don't go out there sort of blagging to be the sort of toughest or anything. We know it's tough, but it is almost like the ultimate team challenge. And yeah, I mean, you just got to give it a crack and see whether you're up to it. Yeah.
And this year you went back to Fiordland, first time since 2018, I think was the last time you'd been in the region. What made you decide to go back to there? And typically GODZone has always been on the South Island, right? You had that 1 year like around Rotorua, I think it was 2019 or so, which was year after Fiordland. But generally, and I think the reason that makes it so tough is just it is the South Island of New Zealand is one of the most rugged terrains in the entire world, right? So you're going to be putting people through their paces. But specifically around Fiordland, what makes it so special? Why did you decide to go back again this year?
Well, I mean, Nathan sort of, is obviously a very well-known person within AR, and I think he said it's like almost like the ultimate adventure racing location. I think the total population in Fiordland, which is a vast area of New Zealand, is only 49. So it's relatively underpopulated, and it's got a wonderful blend of high mountains, rivers, lakes, forest, and multiple different types of, terrain zones, subalpine, glaciers. And it kind of lends itself really well to the variety that we're trying to give teams, because we never really want a race to be, oh, it's a trekking section, we do the same, and then there's another trekking section, and then it's more of the same. We're always looking for that, a little bit of variety within the course, and it is a very special place. And we just kind of worked this year. We just decided with COVID, and it's not a million miles away from a lot of us where we live, so we thought it's a good one for us to do. But do
you live in Dunedin, or whereabouts do you live?
Oh, I live in Queenstown, so it's a couple of hours down to TR now. So I guess it's that spine of the Southern Alps, which sort of goes sort of on that sort of north-south axis of the South Island. And you go on one side of the Southern Alps and it's rainforest. You sort of get over the Southern Alps and it's alpine, and then you sort of 50k down the other side and you're into a virtual desert. So it's such a wonderful variety of terrain, and the team seemed to be inspired by it, but kind of in awe of it. I guess it's such challenging terrain, but we've kind of done that now, and I suspect we won't go back to Fiordland for some time now. It's kind of done its thing, and it's time to go and explore somewhere else.
Yeah, and there's plenty to explore, and I think that's really and we caught up with Chris Vaughan before the race, and he talked about what's so amazing about this expedition adventure racing is you get to go places that you would never normally go. Not only would you not be able to access them, you don't know if you're allowed to, a lot of the area zones are restricted. And so it's really giving that intrepid opportunity for people to feel like they're kind of explorers back in the day, in places where not many people have set foot. Going into this year, Warren, what were your expectations around the teams? I think there was 40 or so teams, or 40 or 50 teams in total across both pursuit and pure.
50 teams in the pure race and 25 teams in the pursuit race. So the pure race is very challenging, and the pursuit race is maybe slightly not as challenging, but it's sort of pretty good testament to teams wanting to come through and give it a bit of a taster. And so for the first time, having COVID, pass by, and then seeing, a good group of international teams sort of come over and wanting to give the race a go. And we know it's incredibly difficult to go against, Avaya and the Kiwi teams on home soil. But I guess if you're a team who wants to prove that you can do it in the ultimate adventure racing location, you've got to come over and give it a crack. So, we just, for us, our mantra as a business has always been, you're not necessarily to produce the hardest race, but it's to produce the best race. And so that means, best media output, best experience, looking after the volunteers, and making sure the competitors walk off the course going, wow, we've done something out there. And that's what we're always striving for. And I'm hopeful we pulled it off this year. But we were very lucky with the weather. So in Fiordland can be very wet, and it could have been totally different, but no, it was good.
Yeah. And the social media coverage was phenomenal. Bells and the team did a great job. It felt like I always find when you're dot watching, especially when they're going through with those really gnarly bush treks, you're looking at it from a 30,000 feet view, but if you've ever adventure raced before, you can just almost see, you can be there on the ground with them. You can understand they're moving at less than 2 kilometers an hour, and just understand how tough it must be. But what were your expectations from the team's perspective going in? Obviously Team Avaya, you kind of, they're you always expect them to be. I mean, they've won every race that they've done as that foursome, so you kind of expect them to be winning it. But there's a few teams coming through this year. I mean, even Chris beforehand spoke about no idea, who he said clearly do have an idea, and then there was like Rob Preston and was coming over from Australia as well with his wife Catherine and their team Thought Sports, and there was the Estonians were coming over, as you say, another international team. They're always do extremely well. So what was your expectation going in from like the pointy end of the course, and who the teams that would be challenging?
Yeah, well, I think you'd be pretty brave to bet against Avaya. They're just such a phenomenal group of athletes and have wonderful synergy and a simplicity. And they've been racing for years. And I know Nathan pretty well. And there's never in any time over the last decade or more have they ever rested on their laurels and said, we're the best in the world. We're done. We just carry on doing what we're doing. After every race at GODZone, there is a long debrief and a look at every aspect of their racing and how they can do what they do better. And, no matter what everyone else has done, people have got fitter, faster, stronger, smarter. But those guys have done the same. So they've never said, well, enough's enough. And what we've tended to find actually in the last 2 or 3 years is that if someone's going to innovate and come up with something which is maybe a different way of doing the racing or a different strategy with equipment, it's actually almost always Avaya. So even though they're kind of 10, 15, 20 years into their adventure racing careers, and you go, well, they just turn up and they're just faster than everybody else. It's not true. They're just as good or better than everybody in preparing and improving, even though as they get older, they're not necessarily going any faster as athletes. So I think that's where the other teams have really got to look to step up and say, okay, well, are we debriefing at the end of the race, and are we getting the right pack rafts? Do we transition correctly? Are we racing during the day fast enough, and do we slow down too much at night because we don't navigate fast enough? There's so many different aspects of the racing. Did we even pick the right paddles? Were you comfortable enough when you were sitting down in your boat? There are so many things that add up to an adventure race over 6, 7, 8 days. And Avaya have never sat back and said, oh, no, we're good enough. Let's stop developing as individuals. They have constantly sought to improve. And I think everybody else knows that now, even the teams that are just fighting to survive and get through the course. They know now to achieve a successful outcome at GODZone, you have to cover off every base of your preparation. So that's what I said earlier on about the teams being better prepared. So the leaders are doing the same thing. They're coming in and then how do we get to where they are? And I mean, it's pretty impressive with a team like No Idea who are coming in their 20s. They've done 2 GODZones now, and that is it.
Yeah,
and
they've not done any other international expedition racing.
No,
so,
I mean
the Traverse last year was their inaugural expedition race,
and they came second on the hardest course we've ever done. And
wow,
yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of youngsters come through GODZone, and that's maybe a unique thing about New Zealand, that the young talent and female talent in New Zealand is unparalleled when it comes to outdoor racing. And
I mean, hat tip to Nathan with his spring and summer challenge. Exactly. I mean, nowhere else in the world could you have 100% female adventure racing race. Like, I just can't imagine it happening and being successful anywhere in the world.
With 1,500, women doing it who are at all ends of the spectrum, but they're out there doing it. And,
off the charts.
Yeah, no, there's been, girls racing at the event this week who, have been got in the top 10, who they might go, well, this girl was just literally plucked out of nowhere. The team of 3 guys needed a girl. They run at this girl from Gisborne. She's turned up and she is just awesome. We don't even know who she is, but there are so many females like that in New Zealand who are incredibly capable. But,
and on that, actually, we have to call out Team Rubwaheen, who came in 4th, right? Aaron had to sub in. Aaron Prince had to sub in for his wife. I think she had an injury the week before, right? Do you know what happened to her?
No, I don't know. But Sarah was there. She was actually the support crewing.
Oh, she ended up being the support. Yeah.
And Aaron was super keen. It didn't take much persuading. So,
Yeah.
you know, Aaron's obviously been around, you know, as long as Nathan, you know, almost, you know, he's a sort of incredibly accomplished racer in his own right. And he just kind of course, God, those three girls are incredible, you know, just so strong and so good. And so, you know, it's testament to the strength of the females in the sport in New Zealand is that there's just so many good athletes.
Yeah, to finish in top 4 with pretty much just one guy and 3 females, I think that's also kind of unheard of, really. I don't think we've ever seen that on the sort of expedition adventure races to have that level of performance. But yeah, they had a pretty good navigator in their team, though, so it kind of is understandable. I mean, so you mentioned around No Idea in their 20s. One that just stood out for me was Fear Youth. They came 7th. They're teenagers. They're like young whippersnappers. Like, what on earth was going on there?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because Finn, who's one of the guys, and now I guess he might be only 17 or something. His dad was racing in one of the other teams, and they actually had quite an interesting battle. But I guess it says something about the psyche of a lot of Kiwi families, is that you're completely at peace with the idea that your son or daughter can go off into the middle of the bush and make some serious navigation choices. It's bluffy, it's big mountains, there's big rivers, and you're completely comfortable with your teenager going out and doing it, you know, really. Whereas a lot of the Western world would be helicoptering their helicopter parenting over their kids, going, I don't think you should go out there. It's a little bit risky. It's like, you know, you've got to believe that your kids are capable, and they are a classic example of, you know, going, you know, once they've got a bit of experience in the outdoors, they can go out there and they're incredible. And who knows how good they might be in 5 or 6 years' time.
Yeah, I mean, just following them. So the 2 of them are 19, Finn Mitchell's 17, and then Joshua's 20. As you say, like, what are they going to be like in 10 years' time? And so let's talk a little bit about the course, Warren. And so I bet you had some fun planning this one out. Like, how long does it take from deciding on the location to actually then like building out the course? How many, I suppose, weekends or weeks did you spend exploring the region and really sort of being out there on the course? Do you cover the entirety of the course yourself, or is it like do you have like a group of you which do different sections of it? How does it kind of work out and planning it out?
Well, I mean, I guess it's changed a little bit over time. I sort of rewind to 2010, 2011, when we first came up with the idea that we were going to do it, was that we probably screwed up an awful lot of pieces of paper, and, you know, you had to refine. Where I guess I've become better at knowing what will work, and the spreadsheets regarding timing have become far more accurate. And then really it's, I guess, like with anything which might have 6 or 10 or 12 stages, you've really got to try and find the 3 or 4 key stages, which are like the linchpins of the event. And then you've got to try and link them in a way which is logical and feels like it's a linear kind of, you know, there's a logic to it. Nothing's too contrived. You're not doing something just for the sake of it, because no team likes going around in a circle just because you kind of think they should do an extra 5 hours of biking. You've got to make it feel like that there's a reason to what they're doing. And I guess we start with those things, and then, and again, I kind of alluded to it earlier on, if you've got 3 trekking sections, I guess the way I would look at it is going, you know, me as a former racer, the last thing I want to do is 3 sections which are just carbon copies of each other. I'd go, well, let's try and make the first section, you know, the first part of it had lots of checkpoints through the forest, which really put pressure on the teams on that first night in the dark, because I knew the leaders would get there at dark. Yeah. And then I wanted the first team to be at 1,700 meters, literally on daybreak, so they could see the sun come up. And it was like, okay, that's my timing. You know, you've done that first mountain bike, you've done the first river paddle, you've got this sort of adrenaline and excitement happening on that first evening, and then it goes dark, and then it's on. And if you're a navigator, you've got to get it right. And then the idea being is you've got a big night in the mountains, and then daybreak, all of a sudden you just get that vista across Fiordland. And we just lucked out that the night before we'd actually had a small wee dump of snow, and the teams were out on those high tops, and you know, they're crunching through a couple of inches of snow out at like, you know, nearly a couple of 1,000 meters, and it was just, everyone said the view was unreal. And then so you sort of, that was kind of the first mountain stage, and then when we get to the second part, it was more, I wanted it to feel more of a strategic challenge. So we had that option to pack raft or trek. And it
yeah,
really,
and so just to stop you there, so at checkpoint 19, so once you you get into the second big trek of the event, there was an option, and you, at that point, you'd sort of pack raft down a part of the river, and once you get to checkpoint 19, you had the option to continue pack rafting down the river, or to be able to trek through the like through the mountains onto checkpoint 20. And if you left your pack raft there, that was it. You weren't able to get your pack raft back. But then if you keep your pack rafts, it means you've got 20 kg, like two people will carry 20 kg pack across pretty much a mountain range. Like, so they're going to be fully loaded up, but potentially going to be a lot quicker going down the river at sort of 5 kilometers an hour. And who knows what the terrain's going to be like if you're going to be bushwhacking through there. And I did ask the question of Chris Fawn, he messaged me earlier around, because they obviously took the option to drop the pack rafts and do which doesn't surprise me given his nav ability of being the best in the world. But I'm interested, before I share what he said, and I'm sure he shared with you already, what do you think would have been the quickest route as you were planning it out?
Yeah, well, I think it's normally a pretty good course plan when I can't, or my kind of organizer, Adam or Phil, who I do a lot of the recce's with, if they or all of us can't work out quite what we do. And I went in with a bit of an idea, and then went up to checkpoint 20 a few weeks before and actually put that checkpoint in up on the mountain. And I was sort of sitting there having a sandwich, looking over Lake Monowai, looking over Fiordland, and going, I still can't work out what I would do. And then I kind of came to the conclusion, I discussed with Phil, I said, I think what I would do was, if I was in the daytime, I would probably decide based on how I felt our team's feet were going. And if we were in really good fine fettle and the feet were holding up pretty well, knowing that we've got a very long trek later on in the race, I'd probably drop the pack rafts and trek. But then in the daytime, in the nighttime, given the tricky nature of that navigation on that ridgeline with multiple false tops and ridges going off left, right, and center, I think I would have pack rafted, because I think it gave me the better option to go down, make 15 or 20 kilometers of progress, and then the trek afterwards, yeah, it was heavier, but really it was pretty much just trending in a southerly direction. And I think as well, it massively depended on the ability of the team. And what we tended to see during the race is that the first 2 or 3 leading teams trekked, then the next 3 or 4.
What time of day was it for the first 2 or 3 leading teams? So did they?
Well, they were sort of getting there at kind of in that sort of dark sort of time. So they had tricky, and then the next few teams, they all opted to pack raft. And then after that, it was a real mix of people. It was just, we just couldn't work out which teams were going to do what. And what was interesting at the back end of the field, the not so strong navigators, as soon as it got dark on that ridge, a lot of them stopped and slept, because they just got to the point, once, you know, it was okay on the open tops, but once they dropped another couple of 100 meters and they were up maybe 800 or 900 meters in the bush line, a lot of them just went, we're just going to make a mistake here, let's just sleep. And so those guys that are pack rafted just tended to be able to make that little bit of progress. So my gut feel was the pack raft was probably marginally quicker, but it really came down to your sort of team strengths. Yeah,
really interesting the way you think of it, because Chris actually said on reflection it would have probably been about an hour quicker to do the pack raft. And I think no idea that we're kind of following the, came after, took the pack raft and ended up catching up a bit as well. I think to your point though, Chris could just absolutely back his nav at night to know that they're not going to need to camp out in the middle there. They'll be able to find a way through the bush in pitch black.
Yeah, I mean, you can't make a course Chris-proof. We've tried, and the reality, if I designed a course that was to test Chris to the whole limit, if you know what I mean, nobody would finish. So it's kind of, we almost park that a little bit in the background and say, well, you know, we're not designing a course of Chris and Nathan. You know, we're expecting them, and in some ways, it kind of makes my job a little bit easier, because if I go out there and advertise that I think the leading team will take 4.5 days, I can pretty much bank on Chris finishing 4.5 days, because he won't make any mistakes or nothing major. Whereas the other teams have got a far higher likelihood of doing something which might add 3 hours here or 2 hours there. And often in venture races, it's the team that makes the fewest number of mistakes that wins, rather than the teams that get all the things right. You know, it's a mistake reduction process, rather than, you know, like doing something really well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And No Idea caught them up there. So coming off the back of that pack raft section and then on to the mountain bikes, I think actually at that TA there, I think Avaya actually took a sleep, or took a few hours, took 3 or 4 hours. In fact, Chris said that, I said, like, how did it feel when they went past? Did you know you'd banked up sleep, so you were going to be out? It's like, okay, that's fine, you go, but we know we're going to track you down. He said typically that would have been the case, but him and Stu got 0 sleep on that. So for 3 hours, like, Nathan was like snoring away, but like Chris and Sophie did as well, but Chris and Stu are obviously the 2 lead nav ones, the ones that actually probably you need them to be able to like avoid the sleep dev, didn't sleep at all. So I think they were a little bit like, oh gosh, we've got you know, they're giving us a little bit of a push here, we need to step it up a bit.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think I mean, one thing I would say, which is pretty impressive, is that, I mean, it's a little bit old school and things have changed a little bit, but certainly traditionally, leading teams are often discourage themselves from sleeping in transition, you know, because, you know, what you tend to find is that it's certainly convenient, but often in transition, it can be noisy. There's a lot of distractions, and you know, you end up with that scenario. Yeah, there's a bed there, but there's a lot of hubbub, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of distractions, there's other things going on, and that maybe that 2-hour stop where you go 15 minutes to get sorted, 1 hour 45 minutes to actually sleep, becomes a 4-hour, 3-hour stop, and you go, well, actually, how much time did I actually close my eyes and actually shut down for? And you go, well, it was actually only 30 minutes. So what No Idea did, which I actually think is really shows that they're at least thinking about it, has gone, let's avoid the transition, get in and out of there as soon as we can, and we just go down the road 2 hours, and then we fall asleep, and we literally want to put our heads down, and within 2 minutes we want to be asleep, and we've all got to be ready to sleep. We won't stop until we're all ready to sleep. Because the danger is, as you said, you fall into that trap of going, all right, well, I'm the navigator, I'm feeling knackered, I need to sleep, and then 3 of them are going, oh, we're so not tired. You know, I can't sleep, and then you just lie there listening to someone else snore. I know in 2 or 3 hours I'm going to be knackered. So strategically, I like what they did, but I think it's probably to me showed the differences between Avaya and the moment and No Idea, is that I think on the ground, on foot, No Idea can probably go head to head with them in terms of pace. And yeah, they're not quite there at the navigation level, but in terms of over the hills, you haven't met probably No Idea, but they're all tall, rangy, strong. They're clearly comfortable carrying big packs. They are going to be crazy fast in the mountains. Probably where they need to close the gap is on the water and a little bit on mountain bikes, because Avaya are just super strong.
They're unbelievable on mountain bikes, aren't they? I mean, I don't know whether it's, what do you think makes them so good? I mean, obviously, like, technically they're all really, really strong riders, but I'm not sure, coming off the pack raft section, like, how technical was that mountain bike through checkpoint 22 through to TA7? Was that a technical mountain bike ride, or was it kind of just like matching up the point to point?
The key for that stage, and again, it was nighttime for them, was that it's the classic forestry block conundrum, where the maps don't always necessarily represent what's on the ground, and we deliberately use that forestry for that reason, that when you're tired, you've got to stay focused, and there's tracks on the ground which are not on the map. And what looks like a good track on the map can often be a track that was put in by a logging company 25 years ago and it's since grown over.
Overgrown, yeah.
And the good track is the one that doesn't look like a good track. And so it's almost like an interpretive exercise. And that is where Chris tends to come into his own, because he always knows where he is. And the lesser navigators get to a junction and stop and go, oh, I just got to confirm I'm in where I think I am.
Yeah.
And they get to the next junction and go, I just got to stop and make sure that I'm happy where I am. And that's where Tiki Tour lost time. And they said themselves on camera, well, that was pretty ugly. And that was just them acknowledging that they got some of their nav through their wrong. And you just give up an hour and a half, whereas Chris just wouldn't have stopped. He'd have just been flowing through every junction without, even batting an eyelid. And then they're just peeling time off the other teams. So that's probably where those other teams really need to sort of step up a little bit and go. And my fear was always on that first paddle section on the first night was Avaya will get themselves to the front of the field and get off into the forest, and they're gone.
Yeah.
They're just so quick when they're paddling. So that's probably where those other teams need to pick it up.
Yeah, and that's what made it exciting this time round. And it always is exciting dot watching, but that actually, no idea, the young team overtakes Avaya kind of halfway through the course, and it's like, okay, race is on. But then on that mountain bike section, and they obviously the no idea had a bit of a rest, and it's almost difficult to dot watch Avaya on the bike sections because they're just beasting through it, aren't they? Just moving so quickly. And then it was through to the next kind of like large trek section, which is checkpoint 24 to 26. And I think there were a couple of like choice nav bits through, certainly when you sort of went across to checkpoint 25, and there were actually a couple of lines you could have taken up to 26. There was kind of two ridge lines which you would have taken. And I think on the recommended course on the dot watching, you'd recommended you would have thought the westerly course would have been the quickest, and actually Avaya ended up taking the easterly. And what were your thoughts around that?
Yeah, well, actually, I'm not saying that I'm particularly devious, but I think since we've gone to the supported.
You're not saying you're particular devious apart
no,
from...
but I think we have said to people that now we know that it's possible for a support crew to look at live coverage and look at where we've tracked the route.
Got you.
What we've done is said that when there's maybe a route decision to be had between checkpoint 24 and 25, we just make it a straight line on the map.
Yeah,
and then we might fill a section in going between the mandatory waypoint, which is actually at Redcliffe Hut, was I was just going, well, I'll just put the route in that I went, but don't necessarily assume it's fastest. They just happened to be the way that Phil and I decided to go, because when we were out there, we were out on a nice day, and we were just going, well, we just fancy going up that way because it looks good, and the scenics will be really good, but it is quite possible that there will be a faster way to go. And that's the beauty of adventure racing, is having teams doing random stuff. And it's an interesting point. I was chatting to Nathan at the finish and talking about the Estonians and Thought Sports, and how hard it is for international teams to come and perform at GODZone. And his prevailing view is really that so many of the other expedition races everywhere else are trails-based exercises where you go to junction, turn left, go to junction on part in the forest, turn right. And it's almost the opposite at GODZone. We actively look to never use a track where possible. So a lot of the decision-based, on navigation is tough. And you've got to interpret the land and go, do I believe there's going to be a deer trail there? Will there be windfall on that section? Which ridge descending will be the fastest? And if I get into that beech forest at the bottom, will it be clear? And if you know New Zealand, you might go, well, that area of the forest is in the shade in the winter. It's on that kind of southern easterly facing. There won't be much growth under the canopy. It's probably going to be quick forest. And it's that decision making which sets the Kiwis apart at home versus the internationals. And Rob's been here from Thought Sports 3 or 4 times, and he's obviously got his head around it, but the Kiwis have just got better and better. And, I think, we do put that onus on teams. If you're going to come and race here, you have to prepare properly. You do need a good navigator. And we all saw what happened to Phoenix Multisport on the first night in the forest. They went around in circles for 2 days, and you had an absolute shocker. And they'd told us that they got strong navigators and they were hoping to get in the top 10. Within 48 hours they were right at the back and lost. And it just shows how hard it is.
And I think that kind of leads nicely onto some of the international teams, and because and you mentioning that adventure race I ran before, you haven't had a support crew there, so actually you never really get to, because you obviously give up your phones from the beginning before you get the map, so you don't, and you never actually see the course that's mapped out on the Dotwatch. But obviously if you've got a support crew, I tell you, you're not going to take the phones off the support crew, are you? So
there's some clear rules around it and usage and stuff like that. But I mean, it's not a surprise is that if you're a team that's coming in 15th or 20th, the first thing you do for the start of the next section is you talk to the crew, go, which way did Chris go? Because you want to know, and you're going, and sometimes, it's interesting because they don't all just follow blindly, because they might go, well, that's all right for Chris because he knows he's going to get every nav call right. Same for Aaron, they will make good calls. Whereas another team might go, well, that's all well and good for them because they'll get it dead right. I might need a few more handholds, or I'm going to follow that ridge line for longer because I don't have.
It's a bit clearer.
I don't have the confidence to drop down into that system down there because I'll get lost. And once I can't reorientate myself, we'll have a shocker. So they might just use it as a confidence boost to think that they picked the right thing. Or if there's 2 very clear choices, they might go, well, which way are people going to go? And, I guess that was the interesting thing about the pack raft and the ridge section. People still, even at the end of the race, were going, no, that's the right way for me. And then the next team would go, no, that's the opposite. We're going to do something completely different. And I think that's one of the charms of adventure racing. You kind of, you live or die a little bit by your own choices. It's brains and brawn, rather than just outright performance, which really makes the best teams.
And another thing that does actually make it quite challenging is that because you have to have a support crew as part of the course. If you're coming in internationally, it means that you've got to either fly someone else over with you or find someone locally to be able to support. What's your kind of thinking around making sure that someone has to have a support crew? I understand from a logistics perspective, if you're having to move everyone's gear around and they haven't got a support crew to move their gear, it makes it more challenging. You can probably get to a bit more intrepid places by doing it that way, but it does make it more challenging for international teams to sort of organize. I'm sure you can agree, Warren.
I would agree with that. And it's kind of interesting. I mean, I guess I'm from a generation of adventure racers sort of where support crews were actually quite common in the early days because of the scale of Red Gaulois and those kind of events in the Southern Traverse. I came over to New Zealand a couple of times to do the Southern Traverse back in the day, and it was just part of the process was you had to have a support crew. And
I mean, when coast to coast, you have to have a support crew as part of that as well. It
was just part of the thing. And I think as races, when Eco Challenged almost sort of died a bit of a death, there was almost a way that, because I guess funding or the amount of money or prize money or whatever it was, the commercialization of adventure racing suddenly diminished. There was a need to cut costs or to provide that way of getting adventure racers to travel and make it easy for them. How do I make it easier for you? And there's a lot of races around the world that are highly dependent on international teams. They don't have a strong enough domestic market to support their race. And there's still races going on now, at expedition races that have 10, 15, 20 teams. And 50% of them might be internationals. And so they're running on the smell of an oily rag, if you know what I mean. They don't have huge amount of resources available. And so the way those people have to operate is by going, well, how do I make it as easy as possible? And in New Zealand, it's slightly different. We have a huge number of teams who want to race. And it's almost a part of the culture here with Spring Challenge and with Coast to Coast, is that support crew is a requirement. And I think we just looked at it 3-4 years ago and went, you know, we're moving 64 tons worth of equipment. We're moving 400 bike boxes, and it's actually starting to impact how we can deliver a course as a team, as a company. And we're going, we could no longer put a bike stage in that was less than 12 or 15 hours long, because we simply couldn't get the logistics to move the bike boxes from the start of the leg to the end. So it started to compromise the experience for us. And we were going, not only are we spending most of our race focused on logistics rather than race experience, you know, it's actually hamstringing how we design a course. You know, we're thinking more about how do I get a box to the end of it rather than what's the optimal finish point. Actually, what we want to do as an organization is provide the best race experience possible. And, you know, a lot of people have said to, oh, it's not competitive because, you know, you've got your Kiwis, they've got 4 support crew and they've got a vehicle that does this. And I say, honestly, Mark Raywood, or this year Tim Sigma and stuff, they are the support crew for Avaya. They have one person, one small vehicle, and not much paraphernalia. And so Avaya are still coming into transition and doing most of their organizing themselves. There just happens to be one person there who's brought their bikes along, put some stuff out, and in 15 minutes they're gone. You know, the only teams that are actually have got 4, 5, 6 people in their support crew, who are the ones who are just doing it for a tiki tour and who are quite happy to have someone feed them a sandwich and hang around for a couple of hours and then go. So, I mean, if you're a competitive team at a GODZone, you just need one person. And most of these teams are traveling with a member of family anyway. You just got to be super slick. Do not use the transition as a resting zone. You use it as a transition from one discipline to the other. And that is it. And so there's no real disadvantage or advantage. So I would just say that for an international team, it might be slightly more challenging. There will always be a Kiwi person that we will find or you will find who are there and who want to be your support crew because they actually love being a part of it. And take it as a positive because I actually believe the courses are better for that experience. And, you know, and even from a health and safety point of view, I mean, GODZone is harder than all the other races out there, expedition races. And having a person at the end of the stage who can look at you in the eye, Scott, and say, you know what, you need a rest. You are done. You are not ready to go out is probably an additional level of safety that we've seen in the race, where it would be normally down to our medics having to go around and look at 100 teams and go,
and not know them well enough, or not seen them throughout the whole course to see how they're progressing. You
know, we can't realistically put a medic on every transition, and you know, it's teams' feet are absolutely done, and it's like,
talking of teams' feet, there was one of the posts on the GODZone social of like a heart-shaped blister, and they'd put eye and then a heart, which was basically an open wound on their foot, and then GODZone, and it's just like that. Oh God, that made me almost throw up seeing that. But they obviously hadn't looked after their feet quite as well as they probably should have.
No, feet are a problem. Bad feet and adventure racing sort of go hand in hand. And
luckily it wasn't a wet week, so it could have been a lot worse on the front if it if we can. I want to talk about Team Avaya and more specifically around Nathan. He has, at the end of the course, or he said just beforehand, that this is his ultimate race. This is his final expedition and race, and he's hung up his hat. He's put down his he's put down his compass, and he is going to head off onto the trails. What has he meant for the sport? And what's your thought around Nathan and his career?
Well, I guess I've had time to think about it and stuff, and it's hard to probably put into words his kind of impact in sport. It's been vast, but I think, you know, most other sports out there, like football, cricket, NFL, NBA, a lot of sports are based on personalities. You know, that's your team is, you know, Beckham, Ronaldo, your cricket heroes, and LeBron, you know, whatever it is. Sport is personalities. But I actually don't, adventure racing has never, certainly not in the last 20 years or so. Adventure racing is about location. It's a unique, it's almost like mountaineering. It's the Everest as opposed to the personality. It's the location takes precedence almost over the personalities, which is kind of unusual in sport. There's probably only one individual that can challenge that kind of standard. How I look at adventure racing is about Fiordland. It's not necessarily the teams. It's Fiordland, or we're going to Rotorua, or it's the.
It's almost the same in cycling as well. I think, like, you know, it's like the Tour de France, or in actually like yeah, I think my dad was obsessed about the Tour de France, but more from just watching all the beautiful views of the mountains.
Yeah.
Didn't really, like, whoever won it year to year didn't really care, but it was more about the course that they were doing.
Yeah,
I suppose
I think we've kind of always thought about with the chapters and with the location. It's such a key part of the adventure racing psyche, and the motivation is that the location and the terrain and the views, they really are the linchpin of adventure racing. But if there's one personality in the last 20 years that has been able to maybe break that or to rise above it, it's Nathan. No one else has. And I think that's a testament to how people respect his mana, his reputation, his standing, his, you know, the work he's done, encouraging all sorts of generations of young adventure racers into the sport, the work he does with those foundations, what he's done with women's adventure racing, with the Spring Challenge. And then obviously at his own performance level, he's probably the only person in the sport who I would say is a legit personality in a sport which is actually dominated by that environment, terrain, or location. And I think, as it's a real testament to the person that he is. And when he talks, people listen. When he says something, you know, he's mainstream news here in New Zealand. And there's very few other people, I say, who have that mana or that respect to ask him a question and listen. And, you know, he'll be a big loss. And I think it'll probably be the last race for Sophie as well, because I think those two are intrinsically linked as part of the team. And I think, you know, part of her reason for her keep coming back and racing was that she just loved being part of that group of four. And, you know, I've raced for a long time and been lucky enough to see a lot of teams come through GODZone, but there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that that is the best group of four people who have ever raced in a team since, you know, the sport began in 1989. There's no better team. And they're going out on top and with no apparent chinks in the armor. So it's pretty impressive.
Yeah. And you're right. What a way to go out. I mean, I think for most sports, you never see people go out on top, do you? It's always like, whether it be football, soccer, whether it be, I'm a big fan of mixed martial arts or boxing or whatever, they're always just, just one more until they're just like, until they're beaten, broken people. And it leaves you with the taste of, you forget what they were like at the peak. And I think that no one will ever forget just how incredible Nathan has been and what an important sort of linchpin to the sport he's been. And I think it's pretty commendable to go out winning the toughest race in the world.
No, it's just, and he's got a great team around him. All four of them are exceptionally good and talented, and they all complement each other. They bring something to the party. And it's incredible that they've raced for so long, but they genuinely enjoy each other's company and have a good time out there. We see them at all parts of the course, and it's like, they're supreme athletes, they're superbly confident, but they're actually having a good time together. Yeah. You know what I mean? They actually want to be there together. It's not some kind of marriage of convenience where they're there because they're four shit hot athletes and it just happens to work. It's like, there's four people who actually want to be together, and they just do it extremely well. And there hasn't been anybody like them. And the fascinating thing is like, okay, that's going to leave a colossal void. Who's going
Well,
to
and that's the question, right? I was probing Chris on, I didn't have the perspective that you have on Sophie potentially not continuing with the team as well. But what does the future of Team Avaya like? I mean, I can imagine a world in which Nathan is still kind of like chairman of the team. He still manages the sponsors and still is behind the scenes. But who would they sub in for them? I mean, I suggested that. Obviously, Chris is good mates with Aaron Prince as well. Like, just imagine having Aaron in the team. I know he's had that on the teams as well, but imagine Stu, Aaron, and Chris as like the three navigators in the team.
All squabbling over the map and who do what.
Yeah, fighting about who's going to.
I mean, you can see. I mean, Stu just always is such a lovely guy, sort of strong, silent type in some ways. But
yeah,
you can see Stu and Chris still keep going, and it's going to take some Herculean effort for somebody to beat, any team with Chris in it. And we sort of said at the finish line this year that, really what we should probably be doing to encourage Chris is to, for the benefit of the sport, is, put him with 3 hopeless celebrities and go, okay, Chris, it's your mission impossible. We are going to give you a chance to pick, 5 or 6 people from this group of people. And you've got 6 months or 8 months to get them adventure race ready. And you know that you're not going to make any mistakes, but can you make adventure races for them? And we'd all be intrigued to see how well you could make a team like that go, given the fact that you're not going to make any navigation mistakes. So, and it's, might be a unique opportunity for him to look at a race in a slightly different way rather than go to the front, win it, go to the front, win it. Can the sport benefit from your experience in a different way? But I don't know what they're going to want to do.
There's a TV show right there for you. Who's the guy that did Survivor and Eco Challenges? What's his name?
Mark Burnett.
Mark Burnett. There you go. You need to pitch that one to Mark Burnett. There's a show for you.
Well, you just, find 3 good sporting people, or maybe people who are tough enough to, be transformed. And you don't want to make it too contrived, but I just don't know what they're going to want to do. I mean, Chris has got 2 young kids now, and and same with Sophie. They're family people now, and kids get older. They get to 7, 8, 9, and all of a sudden the demands from you they need a lot of time. They need a lot of input, and you start to realize your life is maybe the best has passed by, and the kids are going to have got everything in front of them. So I think Nathan's obviously got to that point, and he'll be highly active within the adventure space, and will still be influential. But hat tip to him. He's done a lot for everybody, and certainly done a lot for our race. And he's been fantastic, and I wish him all the best, and Jody in their retirement. And if you think in a few years' time, watch out for his son.
Yeah, I've been following a bit, and his daughter. Didn't she just? She just did really well in the spring.
Yeah, they're all supremely competent in the outdoors. I mean, they're fantastic on the mats. And, I hope we see them at some point, but they're probably quite wisely saying you don't need to do, long races while you're 15,
Too
16.
young.
There's a whole lot of other stuff to do first. And if you fancy doing an adventure race, would you be surprised to see Nathan and his kids racing? No?
Yeah. That's got to be a dream. That's been actually one of my lifetime goals, is to be able to race with my son at some point. Oh, it's a shame that he's not interested in endurance sports whatsoever. But he's only 8 now. I've got some years to convince him. Warren, when did you stop racing?
Was that?
When did you stop racing? Because you obviously you race competitively. You're from the UK originally, but you raced competitively for many years, right? When did you sort of? I suppose once GODZone started, you switched from actual racing to directing.
Yeah, I kind of was still racing. I can't even remember now. I kind of did. I did the last race I would have done was 14, 15. Went to Primal Quest in maybe 15, 16, and then I just knew in my heart it was just, I don't know, it was maybe a perverse thing. And so when I was working in London, I needed the racing and the outdoors as the release. When you move to Queenstown and you live, and I can go mountain biking and skiing every day, I didn't have the same desire for the release. It was like, I can do this every day. It's on tap. So then you look for something else to provide that counterbalance, because I live in the outdoors. My kids are all active. You know, I've got mountains surrounding me. I still go mountain biking most days, and that's for me. And obviously, setting the GODZone course and tramping, it's all at my fingertips. And
Yeah, that makes sense.
skiing, and it's like I don't need to race anymore to provide my outdoor kit. It's actually here. And,
yeah, it makes complete sense. And actually, with that, you have got another race coming up. Your inaugural Australia GODZone. Although I take it you've not mapped the course for that. Who's been the main?
So that's Rob Preston, and so like Rob reached out to us some time ago, and you know he's obviously been around the sport for many years. Has been a accomplished racer. I'd raced against Rob a decade ago, and obviously very keen to sort of kick off an adventure race in Australia, and we were like, sure. And it makes total sense because, we got 100,000 people on social media. We've got all the website, the skills, the branding. It's like, it makes it an awful lot easier for you if you use all our templates, our systems, our social media, our branding. You just manage the course side of it. And we effectively, it's duplicating 50% of what we do, but it's going to be running in Australia, and we will use our skill set to help you. And you as a racer know, with our assistance, how to design a course and what's best for Australia. So, he's obviously highly respected over there, and hopefully it becomes a great success. And, really for us, it's just about, we want people out there adventure racing, and anything that just to promote that is a win.
Yeah, and what obviously you've seen the course. What do you think? What do you think about it? It's are you pretty excited about it?
Oh yeah, no, I mean Coff's around there, and in New South Wales.
Harbour,
it's spectacular, and what I like about it, I mean, it's just such a contrast to New Zealand. We have Southern Alps, we have our landscapes and environments, and Australia is very different. And I think we've always treated Australia as about a common market with us, is that it's just as easy sometimes for someone from Sydney and Melbourne to jump on a plane and get to Queenstown as it is from someone from there to get to Perth. There's no real difference. And so what we're really hopeful of is that we can encourage, we're getting a lot of Aussies come to our races and have done for over the years, and that we really want to see those Kiwis go over. And go over and go, okay, then what have you got over here? Give us that unique Aussie experience. Everything's out there to kill me, type thing. The bush is different. It's just such a different flavor. And then get the Aussies coming here, get the Kiwis going there. And with the idea is that we just want more people adventure racing. Yeah. And, we're just really about building the GODZone brand. It's probably the most prominent adventure racing brand out there, and certainly the biggest in terms of media and social media. And it's just good to see our brand out there, kind of getting larger, and who knows, we might see other GODZone races elsewhere.
Oh, sounds like there's something cooking behind the scene there as well. Can you share?
No. Well, I mean, we're obviously looking and stuff, but I mean, I guess for us, it's.
What about Fiji? I know we've seen a couple of eco challenges there. They went back there in 2019.
Yeah, well, it'd be a nice place for a holiday, if nothing else. But, I mean, every market, there's races going on everywhere. And I think it's been part of the problems for expedition races that we have a multitude of brands, but everything's quite small. And, where triathlon has grown ginormous, but in some ways, in the early days or in its kind of proliferation period, it did so under really one brand, which was Ironman. And that just became a unifying brand, everywhere. And, what expedition racing has is just hundreds of little mama and, like one-man bands, little, husband and wife team running a race somewhere, operating expedition races or adventure races on, really meager resources. Yeah. And, if you're like a small organization, you've got to, provide health and safety, traffic management, media, PR, marketing, health and safety stuff, course, then the whole life coverage platform, and you're doing it on the basis of 10 teams entry fee, you just can't do it.
It's really tough, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, I'm based in Singapore, and we've got a couple of races that have popped up in Malaysia, but I think getting people, and there used to be a really good one that was in Saba Adventure Challenge, which was kind of like more of a stage race for 3 or 4 day rather than expedition style. But then like the same event organizers used to run trail running events, and they could have like 3,000-4,000 people do a trail running event, and then they'll get 20 teams for doing the adventure race, which is way more difficult to organize. And so it's more just around getting more people into the sport, getting them passionate about it. And yeah, one of the reasons we cover it a lot of it on the podcast is that we want to kind of encourage people to get more into it. It's for me it epitomizes endurance sports in terms of the multi-sport aspect and all the different disciplines and the outdoor adventure and really pushing people to the limits, the team aspect of it. It's an incredible sport. And thank you for putting on one of the best events around the world, if not the best, sort of, as we were voted on Endurance Asia. We're excited to see how the GODZone Australia goes, and with Rob Preston running it, and then what else you have in store in future events. And I hope to be able to come down at some point and race it, although I must admit I am a bit scared, to be honest.
You just need to get on a team with Chris and you'll be fine.
Exactly. I can maybe be that numpty, one of those numpties that Chris has on his team, and turns into a proper adventure racer.
Well, just sub in for Nathan.
Yeah, I fucking wish.
Yeah.
Warren, man, I really appreciate it, especially straight off the back of what has been an intense week for you and the team. Congrats to everyone for putting on an incredible event. And appreciate you making the time and rushed back down to the finish line, go and have a few beers with the team and celebrate. And thank you again, sir.
I appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Cheers.
The Endurance Asia podcast.
And always tell a truthful story if they ever ask. Stop the complaining, cause things ain't that bad.